learned a lot of insights listening to all the insurance panels myself, but I wanted to kind of turn it over to you guys, and now I actually have the pleasure of having Nicole be on sharing the insights instead of moderating the panels, because you have a lot of advisory experience. That's very valuable. So in the previous panels, we had a look into the future and how it could actually look for insurers dealing with the new deep tech products and startups. We already know that the race to the next frontier is on. The digital innovation has become a top priority and on the radar for a lot of insurance CEOs. But how do you make the leap and get things right for the organizations when looking at it from a C-level manager perspective? Who wants to open this up? Yes, Nicole.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. I think the main important element, is culture. I mean, we discussed it before. And another element is how do you instill that culture? Agile workshops are nice to have. I think the challenge is that often from a C-level, as you were describing it, how do you intertwine it with the strategy? How do you link it into the planning? How do you kind of link it to the KPIs? Do you? Often what we don't see is a link to KPIs. So you see the normal planning process, and then you have a separate digital innovation exercise. Yeah? And that is more project-based rather than linked to the core strategy. Number one. Number two, digital. I'm sorry, we're in 2018, so everything part of the strategy should also cater for the digital innovation that's happening every day, every second in this world, rather than saying it's something entirely separate. And especially looking here at Aureus in terms of digital transformation, that's part of the core business. So that is often not happening. The other element is the whole idea of how can Torsten, you were mentioning it, the link in terms of ecosystem and working with startups. These are two very different cultures in terms of ability to deliver in speed. Yeah? And I think there, especially from the regulatory compliance perspective, there needs to be a greater link between that.
Yeah, for me, it's like when you look at the insurance companies and you combine the culture to startups, the big difference is that in a startup, you can make mistakes. That's an idea when you work for a corporate company, you cannot do that. You're losing your job. And this ability is, for me, really important that insurance companies probably say, hey, come on, let's try something new. But this philosophy is not there at the moment. When you look, if you do a project and you're under budget, next year they cut your budget. That's the reality we're facing now. But hopefully it will change. But when you look on tech, Johan Tijke said a couple of months ago that probably insurance company is the most valuable company in the future. He said that because all the insurance companies sit on a lot of data. And hopefully they can use this data in the future. Torsten mentioned Metro Mile. Also for startups, it's not easy to use data. They provide pay per use. But back in the days, they said if you're a bad driver, you pay more. But the reality was that they cannot use the data they're getting from the device. It's just a psychologically link that bad drivers not signing up. But if you look at Metro Mile or insurance companies, both startups and corporates struggle to use data and to use a new type of products. It's not easy to use data for Google. It's not so easy to use it. But some of these big tech companies will probably use data to provide better products, and hopefully a lot of insurance companies can use them in the future for better policies.
And since you're managing such a big fund that's investing in a lot of...
I worked also for an insurance company.
Yes. I was just curious, since we're on the topic of insurance, especially as an American, because at least the health system is very conflicted for us over there compared to the benefits we see receive here in Europe. It's quite nice. What are some of the trends that you see in the insurance industry? Is it mainly like health insurance, auto insurance, home insurance? Where do you see the bigger trends in this space?
Yeah, first of all, if you look at the trends, we will not see, as it's just my personal opinion, we will not see the Uber or Airbnb moment to set up a website and offer services. Yeah, we not see that in my point of view, and the reason why is regulation. If you look at fintech and the insurance space, the financial and insurance space, regulation protects this old-fashioned industry. And the big trends, thank you, Torsten, for your really nice presentation, is, of course, corporations. When I look at startups and when I look at ideas, of course, just for all of you, 90% of all ideas will die, startup ideas. Just 10% will survive. That means, of course, there's maybe one disruptor out there. Maybe there's one. Maybe it can be Koya. Maybe it can be, I don't know, Lemonade. Maybe. But the reality is 9 of 10 will die, and the rest, what I really look is for corporation business. And thank you, Torsten, for the presentation. And because, like you said, the insurance companies, they have the contact to the customers. And when you look the whole insurance value chain, there are a lot of startups who can make things better. And OptiPay is one great example. They cooperate with big insurance right now to help them to digitalize.
The trend we see currently is that a lot of the innovation comes from the technology side, and that makes a lot of sense. But it also means that in these companies, there are not too many insurance experts. The guys who found these companies, they come from the academic side, they come from IT side, from mathematical side, but they are not necessarily insurance experts. So the applications they are looking for are typically the less complex insurance applications. So motor is less complex than life insurance, for instance. So it's easier to apply a technology where you know the technology to something which is not, like in German we would say, a Buch mit 7 Siegeln, so a real complex thing nobody understands from the outside. So you go to the more straightforward lines of business, and you go to those lines of business which have large numbers behind them, obviously. So motor insurance is a large line of business, so it does make sense to look there. Health insurance has the highest transaction frequency because you have many more claims per policy in health insurance than you would have in term life insurance. I hope you don't have too many claims there. So one customer, one claim there. In health insurance, more claims per customer. So you go there because there's more to improve. The problem is that startups and insurance companies are really different in their cultures. So these two very different cultures have to find together. And when I go with startups to my old colleagues in the corporate world, it begins with, wow, this is interesting, this is wonderful, and the startup thinks, okay, now we can do a proof of concept. And the insurer thinks now we can do a proof of concept. It's just that now is defined differently. The startup things now means within the next 4 weeks, and the insurance company means within the next planning cycle, 6 months from now. If a startup doesn't get a proof of concept within the next 6 months, they might be dead because the financing might not be sufficient. So you really have to educate insurance companies how to work with startups so that something meaningful comes out. And one thing which I always was opposed to when I was an executive, I now recommend, is that build a central unit dealing with this change. Build a central digital unit. My old argument would have been digital is everywhere, so you can't just have one department be responsible for digital. But it's such a cultural change that you need somebody who guides startups into the organization, who helps consulting the lines of businesses, the distribution channels, how to deal with startups. And they trust people from their own organization more than they trust outsiders, consultants, IT companies, startups. So you need a hub where a startup can land, and they have to help make sure that these proof of concepts come. Because the gap in cultures is huge. And even though we don't like to talk about it because insurers think they are innovative and they are young and they have no problems in working with startups, it's just not true. You have to overcome that gap.
Yeah, and if I may add, I think the startups are coming more from the tech perspective and the incumbents are coming more from the insurance perspective. I think both also need to learn the other skill set. Not to become experts, but I think there is an issue on the incumbent side that IT is still focused on, so there's digital and there's IT, and IT is focused on the legacy systems. And it's often not intertwined, number one. Number two, on the startup side, and there, chapeau to Omnius, because I think they actually, as a B2B startup in AI, very technical topic, they really committed themselves to insurance. And what I don't see from too many other startups, they're coming so extremely from the tech world and want to do a lot of solutions, yeah, to a lot of industries, and then sometimes it's very difficult to bring them to specific, especially in insurance, to bring them together. So I think it also helps from a startup perspective to have a focus point and the willingness to listen and to learn a little bit about the industry.
Yeah, some insights I can share with you. I worked back in the days for OptiPay, and the sales cycle was 2 years. 1.5 years to, let's say, get the improvement or get the green light from the management, and then 6 months for to starting a prototype. And also my point of view is that Omnius took the right industry, but the sales cycle is super long and the closing times. But when you're in, you're in. It's good and bad, and yeah, and also like you said, it's really tough. You have to finance all, the whole time. Yeah, you need money. You have to follow up, and it's really tough for startups. But on the other hand, all successful project I had with OptiPay was when we had a person in the organization who has an internal motivation. Because the management, when you pitch to them, they of course say, yeah, our digital agenda is whatever, we have to do something. But the big problem is when you're in the organization, the internal people, they have to work with it, and it's really tough to convince them to change. And that's in my point of view the hard part for all startups who are out there, who's selling products and ideas to insurances. Management say yes, the organization say probably no, or it's really long way to go.
And speaking of collaboration with startups and bigger organizations, I think digital and IT is a huge element, and it's also difficult to change a lot of the old traditional companies. It's a slow process, and the pros of being a startup, I guess, is you can innovate and you can create change much quicker. But at some point, it makes sense for them to collaborate, and where they meet in the middle, I wanted to ask the panel how to adapt. Actually, AI is a little bit more difficult to implement than digital and IT. So with this newer technology, how to adapt AI processes to other applications for enterprises in terms of integration with, say, in-house systems. What would be your suggestions on this?
For me, the AI discussion for corporates is a link to a lot of fear, because first thing you have to educate the organization what is really AI, and on the other hand, when people realize what AI can do, there's a lot of jobs linked to, and also to Omnius. When they hopefully they're successful, a lot of jobs will die. That's reality, and it's, as my point of view, first thing you have to do is to educate organization what's out there AI tech-wise, and secondly is to show them use cases, what you can do, and take this fear a little bit away that a lot of people will lose a job.
And do you think the reason why maybe AI is not being implemented into more products is due to the technology itself? Like maybe to overcome the lack of AI skilled talents? Like how do we build people to be more educated in space so we can scale different technologies a little better?
I would say it's all about selecting the right use cases. You can have AI as a toy, and then you have some kind of a service chatbot on your website to entertain your customers, or you can have AI as a real tool to modernize your business model, to come up with new business models. But that means that you have to sit down with those who understand the technology, go into workshop and define what the best use cases will be. And so far it's hip to be innovative, it's hip to be digital, it's hip to have artificial intelligence, and then you ask yourself, so how can I show that to the outside and you put a chatbot on your website. I think this is the most boring thing I can think of. It's a good sign that at least people try artificial intelligence, but then I want to dig deeper, and I want to really understand where's the big money? How do I improve? And if it does cost job, I argue that 40% cost is too much. It doesn't matter whether we kill these jobs with AI or with other tools, but the pressure will be there.
Yeah.
But they still make too much money.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's actually a good point, because I think, unfortunately, the insurance incumbents have still far too much money in contrast and are insufficiently under pressure. In theory, they are under pressure, but in comparison to kind of automotive industry or other industry or e-commerce, they're insufficiently under pressure, and it's a very slow reaction. This is why exactly Torsten, you were saying, they start with a chatbot. So often what we're seeing, especially in terms of AI, and this is just adding to what you were saying, is that they're shying away to really redefine the customer journey, redefine what is insurance. Because if you really start to use AI in an intelligent way, if you really redefine the claims process, then you start redefining what is it as part of the value chain. Myself as an insurance incumbent, focus on the data, focus on the customer, focus on the capital I give. What is it exactly that I want to focus? What is my USP? And that would be something where then the AI element has a real value add for the customer and for the industry at the same time. And in that regard, if that was happening, then yes, some kind of jobs would be kind of going away, but not over time. No one's going to like lose their job from one day to the other. But over time, retention, you wouldn't re-employ people in that area, but it would open up a lot of jobs in other areas. So I think the challenge is to be really innovative rather than just do the chatbot.
And since you're advising a lot of companies in this space, how would you manage the expectations, such as in order for buyers to maybe bear the process of machine learning experimentation with patients, for example? Because when you're merging new technologies, people are used to something for a very long time, and not even from the corporate side, but now from the consumer side, you have to actually train customers to accept and adopt all these new technologies. How do you advise companies to kind of onboard them?
Well, comment, you weren't there anymore, Torsten, so I can make the comment. I'm a customer from Ergo in the health space. And the interesting bit was they kept on, it was some of it, especially if you're staying a little bit more focused on what also Omnius is offering, is actually very helpful. So in the health space, rather than print everything, then bring it to the post office, sign it in, do the math, there's like easy adoption. You scan it, and that's it, So me traveling a lot, that's actually very helpful. So the challenge was now, how do you bring it to the customer? How do I know about it? So I'm a person who would immediately adopt, but I didn't know about it. So I got mail, I like physical mail. And they've done in their mail, there was always a 4-pager or 2-pager about some kind of offer, Sometimes if you buy XYZ, you get some kind of green brownie points. I typically throw that out immediately, So, number one, the whole marketing is still steered to physical mail, so probably the ones who are most likely to pick it up don't ever even hear about it. Secondly, then finally I heard about it, then I applied for it, then again you get something in the mail, And that kind of code you need to use not in the app, but on your desktop, So there are so many breaks, and then you can only use it for 2 weeks, So me traveling, I think I had to apply 3 times for this weird code. So I think often while one is moving, it's not so difficult to get the customer there, but there are too many breaks in the journey to kind of make the transition from one to the other.
And by the way, this is not just a pain in the ass for customers, it's also a pain in the ass for employees. When I'm teaching students who also work for insurance companies, and we looked at different tools, especially in the claims area for motor. And I had a student present a tool which I thought is cutting edge for the insurance industry. And he said, well, my company wants me to basically sell that to the customer, sell in the sense of as soon as there's a claim, to tell the customer, why don't you download this app and send us all documentation digitally? It's much easier for you. He says there are so many obstacles in the process that I don't like arguing with the customer, and it's faster for me to just like explain it to the customer where to send physical mail instead of explaining to the customer how to download an app where he or she can always send his claims digitally. So you have to convince the customer. You also have to convince your organization, which is probably willing. This was a 25-year-old guy who does everything digitally, but he says, well, when I do that in my insurance company, these apps are not advanced enough, so I rather try to avoid them. And this is how customers never find out about these options. Yeah. Because employees think, well, if I start talking about it, the thing gets complex. So better avoid it. So you have to think through the process, and it starts with your own organization promoting it.
And do you think most of the AI in this space is more internal facing, like say the technologies to improve company structures and protocols and processes? Or do you think, like say for Alexa, we'll see more of it used, I guess, maybe outwardly? Because I feel like right now, every single time people talk about AI, it's really to improve organizations or their structures or to make things more efficient. But you don't hear so many use cases of people interacting with AI itself, because it is kind of complicated learning, even with voice. People get frustrated on the phone if they have to speak with a bot and it doesn't understand them. So it's a lot higher learning curve, I guess, to put it out to the public than to just use it internally.
I don't even know if I agree. There's not an insurance company, but like another industry with their call center, and there are actually people talking to me, and it drives me crazy. I typically have to call 20 times until I find someone who can actually help me. So perhaps sometimes AI can also help. I mean, there are also new kind of AI startups like I2X who help call centers, because you mentioned it, to improve, so you still talk to a person, but they have an AI-based voice application that helps them to address the customer in a better and more effective way, and also hopefully a more friendly way. So I have some ideas for them. So I think there's more and more also in that regard. I think the question is, there's so much to be done in terms of redefining the insurance product and also reconsidering the implications. For example, a lot of these products in terms of B2C become from high frequency, low severity to low frequency, high severity. That has huge implications on the risk capital. We are just not seeing it, we're not talking about it. Why? Because the steps are so nitty gritty, so you don't see anything in terms of like a broader balance sheet impact. But it will come, especially when the entire industry will join the force. And there are so many questions internally that haven't been kind of tackled yet. And as you were saying, the digital unit should also then talk more with the compliance people, with the risk people, with the support staff units as well, not only with the customer journey element.
I had a conversation last week in Bucharest with the CMO of Revolut about AI. And for me, it's like when you look at these guys at let's say at the startup side, for them it's easy. They have a clear target with millennials. They use an app and they can learn from them. When you look at the insurance side, they have a lot of people, young people, old people. They have a lot of data. For them, it's, in my point of view, much more difficult to collect it and to learn from the customer in terms of AI. And that's, in my point of view, the big challenge they are facing now. And hopefully, they can use startups or they develop maybe internal stuff to use it and learn from the customer. But like I said, the competition right now is like the startups. They have young customers and the tech side, and again, the insurance side. They have the data but cannot use it. And I don't know what the outcome would be, but it's a close game. Yeah.
I really like the efficiency cases for organizations which have not worked with artificial intelligence a lot. Why is that the case? Because the business case is so clear. You have a cost advantage, and this convinces management. I totally agree that there are tons of other applications, robo-advisors, and robo-advisors not in the sense of driving out the agents, but helping the agents better understand the product portfolio. So have a robo-advisor make your sales force more efficient. But the business case for that is much harder to calculate. It's much more difficult to make the case that this really benefited the company. So starting with an efficiency case, say in the claims area, like Aureus is doing, is a very good first case for a company which has not done much artificial intelligence before.
And since Timo brought up data, data in a complete new perspective, I just wanted to touch on the point that which part should insurers take in data sharing open sources protocols. For example, as data becomes more ubiquitous, they will be shared and used across so many different industries. Emerging open source protocols will come together in all these different ecosystems to share multiple use cases. So I guess what I wanted to ask the panel is, with all this data, what is your thoughts on how we can kind of manage it and use it to its best?
I think you need a vision. I think it's a broader problem or challenge. I'm always positive, so it's a challenge, not a problem. I think it's a broader challenge for the entire industry and regulation, and I think we need a vision of who is owning the data, how we use the data, and then as a second step, what do we do with the data. Currently, I see a lot of the discussions, I think Eva is also still there, especially here in Europe in terms of regulation, on the negative side, so what not to do it. At the same time, we don't have any laws or regulation in terms of data monopolies. Yeah? So our laws on monopolies are still focused on the regional industry value proposition focused ones rather than the underlying data. So I think there are a couple of challenges, and unless we define big picture, a vision for what is data, who owns the data, how it should be used, I see a lot of difficulties. And then everything you were mentioning should kind of be derived thereafter.
I wouldn't be too concerned with data because insurance companies are good with data as long as it's structured. And artificial intelligence can help insurance companies to transform unstructured data into structured data. Once it's structured, insurers know how to handle it. They don't know how to structure it.
Yeah, for me, I will turn it a little bit that hopefully we as customers can decide who and where can use our data. Because right now, everyone can use our data for different platforms. Hopefully, we come to a situation that we as a private individual own the data, and I can decide for a period of time that an insurance company can use my data, or I don't know, Facebook or Google. And that's my big picture, that we getting back the control of our private data, not what the companies can do. Hopefully, it will change. Yeah.
And I'd rather give it to an insurance company than to a lot of other people.
Yeah,
exactly
maybe,
as you both were saying.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We ran over some time, so I will probably have to cut the panel off now. But the great part about this is everybody can network afterwards.